Uncollected goods. That is the topic of today's presentation, and it's a important topic because the rules and regulations and procedures in relation to uncollected goods have changed as recently as July of this year. Previously, the rules and regulations in relation to uncollected goods were contained in the Residential Tenancies Act. That has now changed, and they're now contained in the Uncollected Goods Act of 1995. Now, although there hasn't been a great deal of difference in the mechanics as to how to deal with uncollected goods, which I'll explain shortly, there have been sufficient changes for it to merit a presentation like this. But there are two real aspects to uncollected goods which we need to get our heads around when we're facing that situation. The first one is how to determine if the goods are uncollected or abandoned, and secondly, how do we deal with them? Now, behind me, I do have a matrix which I'm going to go through shortly as to how to deal with it, and you'll notice that it's basically broken up into the type of uncollected goods, the form of notice that you're required to give the person who you believe abandoned them or left them uncollected, the form of disposal, and whether or not you need to keep records and how long you need to keep them. But before we get into that matrix, and I will definitely share with you where I think the best information is on this topic, the threshold question is, well, are the goods abandoned in the first place? So this particular threshold question you can look at in two ways or two aspects to it. The first is, if the tenant has given up possession, in other words, they've ended their lease and they have given back to the agent or the landlord vacant possession, and as a result there happens to be goods left behind, then you go immediately into how to deal with those abandoned or uncollected goods, because there isn't an issue to do with the premises as such. The other aspect of uncollected goods, the threshold question, is can I get access to the goods? In other words, if there's a question mark about whether or not the premises, the unit, the dwelling, whether that has been abandoned by the tenant in the first place, you need to deal with that first. So if you're unclear in your own mind whether or not the tenant has abandoned the premises, and then we can talk about the goods later, but if you're not clear about whether they've abandoned the premises in the first place, then don't forget that you must go to NCAT, the tribunal, and you must seek an order of abandonment so that you can repossess the property on behalf of the landlord. Only when you have that order from NCAT are you then entitled to regain possession. And then if there is goods left behind, you can then move on and deal with those goods in the way that the Act is outlining that you should do it. Now, of course, there's a lot of information around this topic on the OFT website, and I'll make sure that there's a link to that in the notes to this particular video. But I found that the Tenants Union website, which is a website designed specifically for tenants rather than necessarily agents or landlords. And that particular website, the Tenants Union of New South Wales, tenants.org.au, again, I'll put that in the notes. That has a very, very useful double-sided fact sheet, which is a very easy digestible fact sheet, which I would commend to you. It is aimed, as you can tell, as an education document for tenants, but it obviously outlines the law accurately, so it's applicable to landlords, agents, and tenants. And in that particular document, the fact sheet number 25, which is entitled Goods Left Behind, it is that particular diagram that I think is a very succinct summary of how to deal with uncollected goods. And if I could now refer to that diagram and walk you through it quickly. So under the new regime, under the Uncollected Goods Act, 1995, you have to basically sort the uncollected goods into items of either rubbish or perishables, which is the top line, or they're going to be low value items, less than $1,000, or they're going to be medium value items between $1,000 and $20,000, or they're going to be a high value item above 20, or they're going to be a personal document. So your first step in working out how to deal with uncollected goods is to determine what value is it. Is it rubbish or perishables? Is it low value, medium, or high value? Or is it a personal document? Once you've established what type of document or item it is, you can then have a look at what form of notice do you have to give the person who you believe has abandoned or not collected those goods. Okay, what type of notice? And you'll notice that it's nil for rubbish and perishables. It's an oral notification, verbal notification for low item goods. It's written for medium item goods, and it basically involves NCAT if it's a high value good, and if it's a personal document, it's written notice, right? Then the next important criteria is how long does that person have, how many days do they have in order to collect the item from you. Of course, you have an obligation as a landlord or an agent to make sure that you store that equipment or item, remove it and store it sensibly and appropriately. And the cost of that storage and removal is something that you are entitled to reclaim from the person who left it there if you are able to, So the notice for rubbish and perishables, you don't have to give notice. You can just deal with it automatically. And of course, you can dispose of it how you wish to. Rubbish and perishables, no need to keep records. All makes sense, right? If it's a low value item, you give oral notice. The person has 14 days to collect the item from you. You can dispose of it in an appropriate manner. They don't describe necessarily how precisely, in an appropriate manner. And you must obviously keep records for 12 months. Medium value goods, written notice required, 28 days notice, and you can either deal with it through public auction or private sale. And of course, you can use those funds to defray the cost of storage and removal, and any funds beyond that, above that, if you've got a lot of money left over having sold it and you've defrayed your costs of storage and removal, you must give those additional funds across to the Office of State Revenue. And you've got to keep your records for 6 years. High value items, have you noticed? It's an NCAT in terms of notice, form of notice. It's an NCAT determination, and NCAT will determine how you will dispose of it, and you keep the records for 6 years. And finally, if it's personal documents, it's fairly straightforward. It's written notice, 28 days to collect it if you are able to. But then if the person has not collected the items, then you must return it to the issuing authority, or you must securely dispose of it. Secure disposal, we're talking about shredding or other form of secure destruction. So how you deal with uncollected goods is very important. If you do not follow the procedures and guidelines, you will be held accountable potentially by the person whose goods it was for the cost of those items. So it's something that property managers and landlords really need to focus on and make sure they understand the procedures. So I hope that's been a useful presentation today. The links to the various sites and documents that I mentioned will be available in the notes to this video. My name is Craig Swan, and if you'd like to comment and critique or ask any questions, I'd love to hear from you. You can reach me through Instagram at Craig_Leverage Group. You can reach me through email, Craig Swan, SWAN at leveragegroup.com.au. And I wish you all the very best. And as usual, happy hunting.